Hello everyone, and welcome to the last program on the introduction of 3D printing. Today, we're going to be bringing your ideas to life. But first, before we dive into that, I just want to do a quick recap on how we got to here. So, in our very first program, we went over the history, the different types of filament and tools a 3D printer can have, and the modeling programs for it. Then after that, we kind of went over the types of 3D printers that are on the market that you can get, and we talked about the printer that we have at our very own library. Then we went over the process of going from sketch to design, and some various applications that you can use the 3D prints for, such as the ones on the table. Now, our second program was an introduction on how to use Tinkercad. We actually went over on how to design Minecraft party glasses and your very own dice. Again, welcome to the final class of the introduction to 3D printing. Today, I'll be showing some of the ideas that the library has brought to life on our very own 3D printer, and some of the prints here that were brought to life on my very own 3D printer. Now, let's take a look at some of the library prints that we brought to life. As you can see, we actually made the various Pokeballs. Now, these actually open up. They were designed to open up, and you can actually hold your very own Pokeball. Now, the ones that we actually have are the Pokeball, the main Pokeball, the Master Ball, and the Ultra Ball. We also have printed up the Master Ball in case you've ever wanted to have your very own. And even we've also got the three starters of the original Gen 1, Charmander, Squirtle, and Bulbasaur. Now on the back here, we've actually have some Mario characters. We have Yoshi here, which is one of my coworkers' favorite characters. Then of course, iconic Mario and Bullet Bill. Now for these prints itself, you don't have to go what they've done in the models. You can actually modify them to your heart's content using Tinkercad or Fusion 360. I've done that myself on multiple times to print up my very own projects that I've done. Now, let's say Yoshi. You don't have to print him up in his iconic green, white, red type colors. You can print up in any type of color you want. And even for the starters of the Pokemon, they don't have to be red. You just have to choose whatever color that you want. Now, like I said, you don't have to do what it is in the design. You can actually add things on your very own. I've done so for my own type of printing and even for designing stuff to make it your very own unique print. Let's say this Yoshi. Now, you could just add a little top hat or anything along those lines on there. It's actually not that difficult, well, at least for myself. All you would do, and you just go into Tinkercad and just add a little hat. Now, some of these prints are very unique because this actually was specifically designed in individual pieces and you glue together to actually have a multicolor print. But nowadays, in case you didn't know, there's actually printer upgrades that have multicolor prints. Basically, that means you have a set of different color filaments that actually go into the printer and change during the print itself. So then, in case you find a file for it, you don't have to print up individual pieces of this and get those little seam lines. It would actually be a true to color Mario. But some people actually are very unique in the way that they design this, because this Bullet Bill is actually multicolor. But the person that designed it actually designed it for parts to be twist on and also snap in place. So you don't get those seam lines, but you still get the nice multicolor prints. And now for some of the other library prints. What's unique about some of the 3D prints, there's something called print in place hinge. Well, basically it lets you one solid piece and lets you have a flexible piece of an object that you print up. This is actually a pangolin, and we actually have it here at the library in our display case. And another unique part is this gear heart. If you hear the squeaking, sorry about that. Because it's actually designed with specific just like gears, just like in an old clock. And it's all held together in the middle, and it actually spins around, which is quite unique. Now, here are some of the prints that I personally brought to life on my own 3D printer. And we're going to be going over how I think about easiest to hardest for difficulty-wise. Now, if you've ever played Fortnite, you might recognize this mask. This is one of the masks in the game that you can get. I believe it's from the Drifter skin. It's a Kitsuin, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, type mask. And this is a type of wearable mask. Now, if you've ever been in here, you would think that it's one piece, but it's actually not. It's actually 3 different pieces that you would actually see on the inside. But the original model itself was one whole piece. So in order to bring it to life, I sliced it up into individual pieces so that it can actually print on the printer. Because you're limited to certain build space for certain printers. Of course, like the cheaper the model, the smaller the build plate, and the more expensive the model, the bigger the build plate usually that corresponds. Now, there's a lot of post-processing to get to this point. Now, when you print, there's actually like small layer lines. Now, you can decide on whether how thick you want it. Like for the layer lines, they can go down to 0.05 or even up to 0.3 millimeters. Now, of course, the lower the layer height, the slower it's going to be, but the higher the layer height, the quicker it's going to be. So really, it's depending on how much work you want to put into doing it, because you're going to need to sand it down. Now, that's just taking a piece of sandpaper going down from 80 grit to over 400. Of course, like in order to do this, to get it to the type of smoothness, you're going to need to do wet sanding. And the whole part about the wet sanding is if you're using a power sander on 3D filament, it's going to melt it because it's going so fast. And even if you're using just your own hand, you may run into that problem. So by wet sanding, it's keeping it cool while also not melting it, so you're able to get that smooth finish. So after that point, there's multiple times where you're going to have to sand it and also fill in some of the layers, where some people have used a combo of spray filler and other types of filling. There's also by Smooth On company a type of brush on layer filler. These all have their pros and cons. I haven't used that specific Smooth On brand, but I plan to in the future just to experiment. Now, of course, after getting all smooth you would actually end up painting it. Now, this was my first time, and I've always had issues with using painter's tape, but I'm remaking this at my own house to try to get it better because I want to get better at this sort of stuff. Now, some of you Zelda fans may know what this is. It's also it's Majora's Mask, and it's wearable. Down here, you may not see it, but there's actually eye holes right here, so you can actually wear this if you wanted to. This was broken down into multiple pieces. I actually used a software which is free to download called Mesh Mixer. This was one whole solid piece. There's all like various pieces, models online that they have used that people have sliced it up to be printed. But some of those issues that came along were that you would have to be exact into printing it, like into gluing it together. So when you're gluing it with super glue, if you're not exact in holding it, it's going to be off, like where the little seam is. And that's, to me, I don't really like that. So a way that I got around it is basically cutting out a section on the seam to be having like almost like a little peg so that they can go together and hold together while the glue sits. Now, this main mask was built in 4 different pieces, and I also modified it so the spikes also come off. This also helps when painting it because as you can see, the spikes are very different colors. And how I did it, I just basically airbrushed everything. Now for one of my, the last one is one of my favorite ones I personally like. I did run into some issues, and I can go over that. If you ever played Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild to be exact, you may know what this sword is. It's the Guardian Sword. Now this was printed up in clear PETG with some black PLA accents. Now what's cool about this is, there we go, it actually lights up. If you didn't know, there's actually ways to integrate electronics into 3D prints. Now that is pretty difficult. I ran into some issues where connecting it or certain parts came apart, and of course, just like with the Kitsune mask, I plan on remaking it. So that piece was actually broke down into multiple pieces. I didn't really have to do a lot of modifying on my part since that was a very complicated piece that I have made. Of course, I ran into mistakes. That piece on the inside, it's actually uses an LED light strip with a rechargeable battery and I believe a feather board or a type of little control board that you use for various DIY electronic projects. There's also some other pieces that someone has designed similar for The Legend of Zelda, which is the Guardian Shield. I've been wanting to do that, but I haven't got to it exactly. The stuff is challenging, and it's still fun. I mean, to be able to work on something for a very long time, to make mistakes, and to figure out how to overcome those mistakes for making this stuff, and just seeing the final product and holding it in your hands, it's just a very worth it sense of accomplishment. And that's how I personally feel. You may feel differently, but it's really enjoyable. I really enjoy creating this stuff, and hopefully if you're watching this, you enjoy doing this stuff too. Now, there's actually some things that I would have liked to brought in, but I'm currently working on still in the modeling phase and also in the making phase. I'm actually making another mask at home, which I modified from a little papercraft model. And if you don't know what a papercraft model is, it's basically origami, super high difficulty origami. What I'm making is the Neon Genesis Evangelion helmet. So basically, I took it from a papercraft model that's about, I don't know, like 18 centimeters in height, and I enlarged it after multiple times of making mistakes and, modifying it to be able to fit my head. Now, of course, this required a lot of sanding, but I haven't gotten to the finished part of it. I printed up most of it and bonded it, but I didn't have enough time to bring it in because I wanted to finish it to a certain extent. Another one I'm making is actually a prop weapon from a show. I've actually designed it to be foldable, like a collapsible sword, just like in the show. It actually uses gears and a servo. Now, how I designed that, it's just a lot of modifying. Now, when I do this modifying part, I tend to look online for pre-designed pieces because a lot of the stuff is open source, and it can really help you save a lot of time to be able to bring the stuff and make it to be in real life. Yes, so I'm still in the modeling phase of that sword, and hopefully one day I'll be able to make it so all of you can see it on our Facebook, and maybe even having it in display case so you all can see. And that just really depends on in the future. Now, if you really enjoyed this small introduction to the various things that I've made and also the history and all the previous programs that I've done, there's actually more in-depth videos that you can watch. And the library provides a really good service. It's a free service. It's called lynda.com. So if you're a Poplar Creek Public Library card holder, like you have our card for our building, you can access lynda.com. So if you just go to our main website, pclib.org, and you go under resources and click lynda.com, it'll bring you into the login page where you just have to log in with your library card, and that's it. And then you're able to learn all sorts of different things. You can even type in 3D printing, and 3D printing videos can come up very, like going from beginner to experience, and even 3D modeling. And these videos have even exercise files in case you wanted to learn along or practice doing it. Now, I just want to say thanks for watching along, and make sure to follow us and like us on Facebook and YouTube to see even more amazing programs and videos from the library. And I hope you had a good time. Goodbye.